I'm going to start with prayer, and then we'll get to the thick of this. I hope to cause you to think today. To really cause you to think. Dear Lord, I pray over this time here. There have been so many great lessons that we've learned today. So many incredible speakers and so much great perspective as we do this thing called ministry. Lord, may we hear what you want to say. May we be able to apply it into our local church context, seeking your Holy Spirit for the power and the wisdom and discernment. I pray that you'll speak through me in these next 30 or so minutes. In Jesus' name, amen. I'm going to preface this with a story, probably one of the most, it's a great story in the Bible, but it's a difficult story. Judges chapter 6 and chapter 7. Those of you who know your Bible know that's the story of Gideon. All right, so chapter 6 starts verse 2. It says, the hand of Midian prevailed against Israel because of the Midianites, the children of Israel made for themselves caves and strongholds which were in the mountains. And so the people of Israel would hide in the caves and the dens. Why? Because the Midianites were so fierce and they were so ruthless, and the Israelites were pretty chicken at that point, and so they would hide. So if you know the story, God reaches a guy called Gideon and encourages him and says, you're going to go out there and you're going to fight against the Midianites, which in and itself seemed impossible, which Gideon did that. Then chapter 7, Gideon assembles his army, he assembles his guys, and in chapter 7 it says, verse 2, the Lord says to Gideon, before I get there, in chapter 7 verse 1, it says the people were encamped besides the well of Harod, so that the camp of the Midianites was on the north side of the hill. It seems little, but there's a piece that we're missing that I'm assuming I'm going to fill in here. So God inspires Gideon and says, go out there and fight, and Gideon finally says, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then at the top of chapter 7, we see Gideon and the men across from the Midianites. I assume by the time chapter 7 verse 1 happens, Gideon has assembled people that he can trust. And I would assume that they've done some sort of training. I would assume that they've got some sort of an idea of what they're going to do. Alright, because if the slide is, I would assume that they didn't go out there like Captain Caveman. You guys remember the cartoon Captain Caveman? Anybody remember that? When I was growing up little, young people, you'll remember it, but Captain Caveman, just this caveman with a bat, that was Captain Caveman. And I'm guessing that Gideon didn't say all the Israelites were just going to run out there like Captain Caveman and swing a bat and hope we strike someone. Why? Because on this next slide, this is kind of what the enemy would look like. Right? You're not going to defeat that with some random act of, I'm just going to swing a bat and see who we strike. So my guess is by the time we get to chapter 7 verse 1, they're trained, they're chosen, they've got some ability, some skill, and Gideon's looking and he's saying, I think we can do this. He has about 32,000 men. And he says, I think we can do it. But then chapter 7 verse 2, weird thing happens, and I hate this. I hate that this happens. The Lord says to Gideon, guess what? The people who are with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, or else Israel will claim glory for itself. So what does God ask Gideon to do? Reduce, scale down. Keep that visual. Scale down to 300 men. With 32,000, I look at that, I'm like, yeah, it's possible, I can do it. With 300, how do I win a war with a limited amount of resources? And that's generally where we start. We've got a big battle to fight. We've got a call, we've got a destiny, we've got a goal, but we've got limited resources. If you go to the next slide, we bring it close to home. The Bible tells us to go out into all the world. How do we win a war with limited resources? And so that's what I want to talk about today, because we face that. I think it boils down to what God told Moses. If we go to that slide, Moses is standing in front of the Lord. Can you read that? Can you see that? If you can read that, read with me Exodus 4, 1 through 3. Then Moses answered and said, "But suppose they will not believe me or listen to my voice. Suppose they say the Lord has not appeared to you." So the Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" He said, "A rod." And he said, "Cast it on the ground." And that's the starting point. God says, "What do you have in your hand, Moses?" "All I got is a rod." Cast it on the ground. Let's start there. And we as people of God seeking to do God's will have to remember, what do you start with? What do you have in your hand? Is it a rod? Okay. Well, cast that on the ground and God can use that. So how do we win the war when we have limited resources? How do we use what we have to reach those around? And so put that key question, how do you gain or develop resources to reach your community when all you have are limited resources, whether human or economic? So when I came to Nashville, you can go back to that, Tim, in 2004, we got in October 10, 2014, all that was in the church at that time, the rod, the 300, we had about 10 seniors. That's it. There were no active ministries. The community was closed. You can't imagine how many people came up to me and said, "Oh, I thought that church closed down." There was no significant financial surplus, and there was no clear vision or focus. It's today, April 2018. We have about 50 regular members of our church family, both members and non-members, but they're regularly attending. There's a clear vision. You may not really see that. It says, "Show Jesus, share Jesus," a vision statement, and that's what we're driving home and through everything that we're doing throughout the entire year. So every year there's a clear vision. We know what we're doing. We've got active student ministries every Thursday night. We have an active women ministry. We have if you come to our church, we have all generations. We've got little kids, we've got crying babies, we've got crying teenagers, we've got young adults, we've got seniors. It's all generations. They all join together. We've got an active creative art ministry, which includes on Sunday mornings, and it also includes, we're doing acting and music classes for the community. We're doing that. We're going into our second year of that. We have Bible studies every Sunday night. We have prayer gatherings every Wednesday. We have about sometimes 15, 16, sometimes 24 people that come out for prayer. Look at the top number. We have about 50 regular attendees to church. About 20 people come out to prayer on Wednesday nights. Right? We have plenty of fellowship out, and a lot of times I'm a movie guy, Christian movies, so we'll go out, we see all the new Christian movies as they go out, or we'll do movies at the church. I've got someone who offered to cook food every fifth Sunday and wants to just feed the church family. And the church family likes to eat, so we'll be doing things like that. We've got a functioning board. When I came, the board wasn't functioning. It existed, but it wasn't fully functioning. And we have healthy financial standing. Includes money now that we budget for missions. We give to missions and mission. And so we went from 2014, we had 300 men, to 2018. We're not there. We haven't arrived. And I'm not saying up here saying, man, we did it. We got it. But what I'm saying is that you got to start somewhere. And if you start somewhere, you can get closer to what God is asking you to do. So I liken, if you go to the next slide, I'm going to liken this to a football field. Brother Ashley this morning talked about baseball. I don't know anything about baseball. In fact, I don't know anything about football either. But I basically know that in football, you've got a field, you've got 100 yards, right, from end to end, and a team starts on one side of the field, and their goal is to get the ball down to the other side of the field. You get down to the other side of the field, it's a touchdown. And so if I were to think about, man, how do we get to anything that we're doing in ministry? That's a great analogy. You start somewhere, so you always ask, where are we starting? What's in your hand? You can't do or go further along in anything until you at least say, where am I starting? Well, I'm starting here in the end zone. All right. Now, what's the goal? Well, the goal is 100 yards down the field. I got to get to that end. I got to get the ball across that into that end zone. That's the goal. Big question here. Why? Big question. Because a lot of us want to do something. We want to grow. We want to change the music. We want to change the new. They're hanging lights here. Why? Someone should have thought of why. Why do I want lights here? Why do I want to paint the wall black? Why do I want to hang the speakers? Why? Why do I want to put a playground in the back of my church? Why? It's not just where do I want to go, but why? Why am I going? Well, because if I don't get the ball into that touchdown, that end zone, I'm not going to gain any points. And the goal of the game is to gain points. And I got to get down there as much as possible. I got to get down there more than the other team gets down there. All right, well, that's my why. But from what I understand about football, I can throw a Hail Mary. Right? And Hail Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, David. Hail Mary is when the quarterback just throws the ball as far as he can, as hard as he can, hoping that there's a receiver there who gets that ball, runs it into end zone and gains the point. Is that kind of what it is? And it's kind of just hope. This is my last hope. Well, that's one strategy. But more times than likely in a football game, what they're doing is they're looking at the 10-yard line. Why? Because if you cross the 10-yard line between your 4 downs, what do you get? You get a first down, which gives you 4 more chances to try to get another first down, which gives you 4 more chances to try to get another first down. And if you get enough first downs, you get closer to the end zone. And a lot of times for us in the church world, we're looking at the goal. We're saying, man, we want a church of 10,000. And so we just Hail Mary. We just starting programs and doing this and that. And number one, we haven't answered why. And then we haven't set what's the 10-yard line? What are the small things that we can do that are going to get us another chance to get closer to the goal? If we do enough, we get enough first downs, before we know it, we find ourselves in the end zone. You get what I'm saying there? Yes? So, if you go to the next slide there, one of the things that I had to do when you looked at first downs, for the church, we had no vision, so I had to define a vision. So when I asked them, what do you want to do? We want to reach the community. That's the field goal. That's great. What does that look like? Why do you want to reach the community? Well, because the Bible tells us, okay, so then what does that look like? What does it look like to reach the community? I don't know. What does it look like to be a light? Well, you don't know. All right, so then guess what we got to do? We got to start defining some 10-yard lines. Does that mean that we want to get involved in things that the community is getting involved in? Does that mean we need to start to meet people? Do we need to start doing events? Do we need to start building programs? What does the community need to do? We had to create a financial cushion. Well, interesting way that we've created a financial cushion is that, we wanted to have some money in the bank so that we can do ministry. I heard you say, Reverend Sherman, you've got to be able to just spend the money to reach the community. Well, we had a little bit of money. Didn't have a lot of money, but one of the things that I did was I looked at our budget and I said, well, number one, we're going to propose a budget. They didn't have a proposed budget before. They just kind of spent money, and my treasurer is a great financial steward. He's really great, but they didn't have a budget. And so I said, well, what we got to do is we're going to put on paper where we want to spend our resources. What things are important to us. Missions is important to us. If we really care about what God has told us to do, we've got to put money in for missions. Which means if we're going to create a line item for missions, we communicate that to the church. I heard Brother Ashley said it earlier, you got to communicate that to the church to let them know you can sow into that field. You can sow into missions. Why? And then we'll show you what we're spending it on. So Papua New Guinea, we started to support Robin Crowell out in Zambia, and we let people know that's what your missions money is going to that. And we've added some other things. We did the cup of cold water when it was presented. It's funny, we were sitting here during district conference and that was brought up, and my treasurer looked at me and said, yeah, we should do that. We brought it back to the board. The board said, yeah, we should do that. We just started creating these line items and say, here's a first down. It's a 10-yard line. Here's a goal. We want to see God bless us. Well, where's it going to go? Because He's not going to, I I don't believe God's just going to bless you with money for you to sit up and store up. It's funny, I'll throw this out here. I had a meeting with my board, January-ish, I think it was. No, probably November. It was the end of last year. And we were talking about our money, and we were talking about what to do, and we had this extra money, and I asked them, I said, what should we do? Should we put this in a bank account somewhere and let it grow for us in case we want to use it down the line? They looked at me and they said, no. There's missions work that we can spend it on. Let's send it out to the missionaries. Let's do something for the kids. Let's do a block party for the community. Let's spend it. Why would we just store it up? Let's spend it. They didn't think that way before. 10-yard line. You get what I'm saying? Music ministry, we had a guitar player. When I got the very talented guitar player, and he would get up there and he'd play the guitar and he'd sing. Very talented. But that's what he would do. He'd play the guitar and he would sing. I got there and I said, well, we want, in my mind, I'm thinking, we want a music program, which means it has to be beyond the one musician and a song. So how do we do that? Why do we do it? Because God started sending different generations, different ages. So I understand I don't want contemporary music just to have contemporary music because everybody has contemporary music. Right? A lot of us, we say, man, we got to change the music in the church. Well, why? Why do you have to change the music in the church? You can believe the lie. You start playing contemporary music in your church, all of a sudden all the young people are going to show up. That's not necessarily true. You can have a bunch of 6-year-olds playing modern music and 20-year-olds may not show up, although it might entertain them a little bit. Why? Why do you want to change the music? Well, we wanted to change the music because God was sending generations. Not only was he sending generations, but he was sending ethnicities. So there were now black people, Spanish people, right? They were now sitting in the pews, and there were 10-year-olds and 20-year-olds. And so that tells me at some point, like you said, Brother Sherman, the song that was written in 1921 or 1960, whatever, was not relevant to the kid who was born in 1980 or 1990 or 2000. So that tells me we need to do something that they can enjoy an experience of worship. So I've got the why. How? I got one guy who plays the guitar, and that's basically what he plays. He plays hymns, and he does it excellently, but that's what he does. So what was my 10-yard line? First thing I did, right, use what you had. We had some people in the church who were younger who liked to sing. So I said to him, brother, why don't you let them come and sing with you? Well, number one, that would give him someone on the stage with him. But what it ended up doing is it made him say, all right, they can sing with me, but that means we're going to have to practice. We're going to have to run rehearsals. Okay, so start running rehearsals. We got a system of running rehearsals before the worship time. Then you've got this group that's now singing every week say, hey, have you ever heard this song? And he would listen. No, I've never heard that song, but we can try. Do you like that? Yeah, I like that. We can try that. He starts incorporating some of those songs in there. Another 10-yard line. What we start doing then is things like, and I'm not going to worry about the songs there, Tim. What I started to do is now we had a congregation that wasn't really used to playing tracks and loud guitars and all that stuff. It just wasn't, it wasn't something that they did. So one of the things that I do is I'll search things online all the time, and I start finding some of the old hymns, How Great Thou Art or whatever it might be, and I'll start finding those things, but I'll find contemporary versions of those songs. And then I would play it, and I'd have the lyrics overhead. I had a little projector that I used at one point, and I would play the lyrics overhead with this contemporary music, and then I'd say, would you open up your hymn books to hymn number such and such and such? We're going to sing Come Thou Fount. And so, all the older people are kind of opening up the books, and they're turning to Come Thou Fount. They're reading it from the book. All the younger people are looking at it, and they're reading it from the screen. Same song, but I'm now introducing new instruments to them. So now they're hearing drums, now they're hearing guitars, and they're kind of singing the same words, but they're hearing different music to it. And I've done that. I'll do that with gospel, black gospel music, and that has some really rich choruses that you can sing that congregationally. Start to introduce those things, and people start to get used to hearing those things. And now, if you come to a church service with us, our music set is just so diverse. There's some up. There's some, we'll still sing out of books. We'll sing off of the screen. At one point, our projector died. And I went and I said to the church, well, our projector died, or it's dying. And I said, man, we're going to need to replace this thing. And their idea was, why don't we just put a TV? You may not know how big that is. That's big. You should, that's what, I'm going to say that again. I want you guys to give me that. And they said, Pastor, why don't we just buy a TV? Yeah, that's what I said. 10-yard lines. How do you change the church using what you have? For me, I said little 10-yard. Where am I trying to get to? How am I going to get there? Why am I trying to do that? And if I'm trying to get there, what's the 10-yard line? 10-yard line. Sometimes it's students, right? How many of you say, I don't know if anyone in here, you have in your church, maybe you don't have a real active student ministry. Anybody in here? No? Everybody has an active student ministry? No? It's like, I've had people who say, man, we want to do a student ministry. We have one teenager. Or we have two teenagers. We have, one kid, one child. How do we do that? Well, the same principle. Where are you trying to get to? Well, we want to have a thriving student ministry. What does that look like? Well, it's, music and pizza and I don't know what it looks like. You got to define that. Why? Why do you want a thriving student ministry? Number one, I think your why should be because you're trying to pass down the legacy of the church, the energy of the church to another generation so it doesn't die on your watch. I say this to my wife all the time. I do not want to be the one, I don't want my generation to be the one where Christianity dies. I'm very passionate about passing faith down to the next generation. Well, why? Because we know we need to reach this generation. All right. You want to thrive in youth ministry? You really believe you're called to reach the generation? How? What do you start doing? Start setting up your 10-yard lines. What's the 10-yard line? Starting with what you have. I got one student. 2 students. 2 students realistically doesn't make for a very fun youth ministry. That's the reality of it. So what could be the 10-yard line? Maybe there's another student ministry somewhere around that you can partner with, and you bring that student to that student ministry, and I would suggest you don't bring it to the one that has 5,000 students, because what you've just done is you communicated to your student that this is what it looks like, and if you can't get to 5,000 students running around, you'll never match up to the 5,000 student one. But maybe you find one that has 10, 15 students, and you bring them. So that they're identifying you and your ministry, but you're letting them do something that's fun. And, at some point, maybe the next 10-yard line is bring a friend and I'll give you cookies or ice cream or something. Bring your brother and then you get 3 people going with you. And then at some point, maybe you get 5 people. And you might look at 5 and say, all right, we can do this in-house now. We could bring some of that stuff in-house. Maybe there's someone in your church who has a heart, a passion for kids. They just have never had a chance to use it. What's the 10-yard line? Probably first 10-yard line is let me train them. Let me send them somewhere to a youth training something and you pay for it. Right? You get them trained. You get them exposed to see what youth ministry could look like. You pay for it. You bless them, you buy them lunch, you pay for their transportation, put it in your budget. I have a budget line in my proposed budget for training. That's new. I think the first time I put it was last year, because I realized that if we want to do excellent ministry, we've got to have our leaders trained. And the leaders may not have money. The church is going to pay for it. Invest in them. That's a 10-yard line. Get them equipped. Get them around other youth leaders. Allow them to dream a little bit. Allow them to write down ideas. What if? I love what ifs. Give me all the what if. We don't use every what if, but at least let people start to dream. Start to think bigger than themselves. 10-yard lines. So now you've got 2 students that have been kind of going to some sort of a youth ministry. You've been bringing them. Now that you bought them ice cream, them and their friends or their cousins or whatever it is, you got to 5. You got someone who you've been spending money on training behind the scenes. They've got some ideas, some what ifs. Now you can put the leader in the room with the 5 teens and let some brilliance happen. Let the kids start to dream. Man, what if we did this? Yeah, I saw them do that. We can do this. Think of what the energy you get when you got some students that are visioning what their ministry can look like now, because they've got a template, they've got a model, they've got a connection with you in the church. You've got a leader who says, I don't know if I can do it, but I'm willing. They're dreaming together. Man, you're getting closer and closer to that goal. Does that make sense? 10-yard lines. I've got tons of examples. Leadership board. How many of you got an incredible board? Raise your hand. Everybody, go ahead, everybody raise your hand just for the heck of it, so no one looks at me. They don't like me. When I got there, the board existed, but it wasn't functioning with excellence. It existed. I mean, they did decently, I guess. They called me. So I guess that was good. But the discipline says that the board is to be the spiritual leadership for the church. And board meetings, when I first showed up, were simply, we met to do administrative duties. We were, figuring out how much money we had in the bank, if that, figuring out the roof had to be repaired or whatever. I mean, just things like that. I said, Lord, I need this to get out of that. I need it to become they need to be the spiritual leaders. So I had to go. Why? Well, number one, the discipline says we're supposed to. That's what they're supposed to be. But number two, because the church needs. I don't remember who said it in the church needed someone beyond the pastor to rally behind, to see moving the vision forward. You expect the pastor to be all in, but you kind of need some other people all in too. And so the spiritual leadership of the church is very important. So we had to get them from administrative to spiritual leadership. How do you do that? 10-yard lines. One of the main yard lines is placing the right people. So there's some other people that God was sending into the church that I had a chance to watch their lives and talk to and see their heart for the church. Brother Alex is one of them. Brother Alex was there 10 years now, I think, probably over 10 years at the church. And, he cares about the church. And I said, man, one of the best things I want on the board is people who care about the church. So I asked, Alex, would you like to serve on the board? Yeah, he'd like to serve on the board. So, all right, so placing the right people. We've got a couple of other people and every year God's been sending someone, and I get to place them on the board, and they're spiritually mature, and they're growing in the Lord, and they're perfect, but, we're starting to strategy, just put the right people so that the right conversations start to be had, because in 2014, they would never have said, hey, let's take all the money that we have, that we've gained, and let's send it out, and let's do a carnival for the neighbor. They wouldn't have done that. But because we moved the ball 10 yards at a time, in 2017, whenever we had the conversation, their worldview was different. We sit down now and we're looking at things like membership, and we're praying over the people, and they're asking specific questions. How is so-and-so? I spoke to so-and-so, and so-and-so's not. Do we need to pray for such and such? And we need to wow, they're becoming the spiritual leaders of the church. It's 10-yard lines. 10-yard lines. If you can imagine in your heart what God is asking you to do, what is your Midianite? What's the challenge before you? And what's the 300 that you have? Where are you starting? And why do you need to get to there from where you are? What are some areas that you would say, I think I've got maybe 5 minutes. What are some areas that you just call it out, that you would say, man, I'd love to see the church go here? Anything? No? No one? Transportation ministries? Anything else in your worldviews? Young adults. Young adult ministry. Interesting, yeah. Do you have any young adults now? Yeah. Starting to come. Young adults are really weird. Because young adults, I think someone said earlier, young adults walk by the church and not know that it's even there. It's irrelevant. And so you look at, you need young adults. Those 20-somethings, you need them. They are so, if you don't think you need 20-somethings, you need them. They're on the crux of technology and information, and they're able to relate to the young generation easier than you can. They can run around. You need them. So that's your goal. Why? Number one, because they've got the energy. Number two, because they're important. They will spread the gospel message. They've got the connections. They're hanging out in coffee shops. They're working around people. When you've got a bunch of retired people, they're not engaging with people. You got a bunch of 20-something, they're engaging with people. And so now you start to figure out those 10-yard lines. So you take the one or two that you have, and you strategically, how do we get them? How do we, number one, disciple the ones that we have? What do we create what discipleship opportunities do we create that are interesting to them? And a lot of times for the 20-something, it might be location. I think it was you, brother. You said you go to a coffee shop with your little laptop there and say, hey, you got a question, ask me and I'll buy you a drink. You know how many 20-somethings would love to get free coffee? You know who's got to pay for that? Your church. You put in a line item. Young adult ministry. And they ask you, why is it always Starbucks coffee? Because that's where I do young adult ministry. That's where they are. 10-yard lines. 10-yard lines. Once you accomplish that, maybe there's a college campus. Maybe you can do mentoring on a college campus. Maybe there's someone who knows, I don't know what they learn in college, algebra or something or whatever. Get a strategic relationship with the college. 10-yard lines. 10-yard lines. Any other areas before I leave here that you say, man, how do we get there? You have a goal. Here's what you're trying to get to in your churches. Anybody going once? Seniors? Seniors ministry. Seniors, I heard someone say earlier, seniors are so relevant. Seniors sometimes believe that their day has gone. They think that the church is all for the young people, but it was said earlier, the seniors have to pour their knowledge into someone. And so that's what you talk about intergenerational ministry. One of the greatest things for seniors ministry is to be able to pour into them, but also giving them the opportunity to pour into others. So it's really strategizing. Number one, why do we want ministry to seniors? Probably because you want to encourage them and keep them engaged, because you want to validate them and show them their worth. The worth that their years have given them, and show them that they have something that they can pour into someone else, a younger person. So they may not be able to run around and do all that. They might not go to the, Dorney Park or whatever, King's Kingdom or whatever it is, ride on roller coasters. But they might be great in your prayer ministry. They might be tremendous in your prayer ministry. And things like that. So it's, what are those 10-yard? And maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's creating a Bible study for seniors. Maybe it's putting them on prayer teams, assigning them to pray over different areas. I heard someone earlier say, give them a name. Give them a person that they're praying for, a young person that they're praying for. And show, hey, that's who you've been praying for. That's little Susie. Oh, okay. As they're praying and they're actively praying and you're checking in on them, they start to gain that connection. God starts to put that together. Good. If you could jump down to, if you can find that property renovation. One of the things that we did in 2014 when we got there, we got to the church and the church was in, trying to find the words. Disarray. I'll take that from you, Alice, because you were there before I got there. It was in disarray. Here's what it looked like. I don't know if you can see these pictures. But this is what the church looked like when I got there. Do you see those blue things up there? They used to feed the whole of that room there, and that room had storage. It had refrigerators, and it was a great ministry. But one of the things that when they said they wanted to reach the community, be a light in the community, what were they doing? They had a feeding food ministry, feeding homeless people ministry. And that's good. It was really, it's good. It was value. There was value to it, but that didn't necessarily make us a light into the community. That made us a handout to homeless people. It never translated into discipleship opportunities. So I said, well, we weren't really being alike. Probably much better partnering with an organization that was actually investing in the lives of homeless people, maybe finding them homes, giving them jobs. And so we started to do that. We started to network with organizations that did that so that we could do something that was more productive. And then when that translated into people at the church, we can disciple them. And so that's what the church looked like. And I guess because that was all that was needed. Could you go to the next slide there? So we did renovations. You can right-hand corner, that's the children's room. That's where all those little buckets were. Refrigerators, we knocked out a wall, we put that in there. The hallway, the slide before that, it was all broken up. We renovated that. We put some paint on the walls. We had a work team that came down from Pennsylvania, my old church, that came and did all of this stuff. Well, why did we do that? Because God started sending new people. We didn't do a building project just to do it because we had a whole bunch of money to waste. No, God was sending new people, and the church it no longer matched with the new frame of reference we were trying to give to new people or the ministries that we were doing. This is where it started. Pastor David, you were part of that. This whole renovation project started with the bathrooms. You guys came for that. All right? You guys laid down the floors and helped us break down walls. But it all started from that bathroom. 10-yard line, right? We got to do a church renovation because people are coming. The church doesn't really want to spend all the money that's going to take to do that. So what do? 10-yard lines. First thing we did is we tackled the bathrooms because the bathroom was an eighth of the size of that. One room, all the people of the church looked at, whoa, that's nice. We should do that for the rest of the building. Yeah, you're right. I could have told you that a year and a half ago. And then God supplied the people to come down, and we did that for the rest of the building there. 10-yard lines. 10-yard lines. I'm going to leave you with this. This would be all philosophy, church growth book stuff, if it weren't for prayer. If you want to sense what God wants to do, pray. We've got to seek God's heart. Not everything we want to do is for us to do. Not every change that we want to see done is for now. And not everything is for every church. It was said, I think, the brother said earlier, if you've got a church down the block that's already doing it, they're already doing a food pantry. We don't do a food pantry because there are several trees. I don't need to reinvent the wheel. Someone's doing it. I'll join them. I'll help them. We serve. So not everything's for everybody. That's why you got to ask the why. Why do I want this? Well, because everybody's doing it. Well, if everybody's doing it, you may not need it. But seek the Lord in prayer. God, what are you calling me to do? What are you calling our church to do? For me, First Wesley in Nashville. What do you need First Wesley in Nashville to do? Our personality is a little bit different. You may not be able to do what we do, and we may not be able to do what you do. But pray, God, what do you want done? I'm going to leave you with a message to a lay leader. Well, get it done. One of the best things that a pastor, speaking as a pastor, wants to see is the lay people catching the vision and saying, you know what? I can help do that. Yeah, we need to reach young people. I like young people. I'm good with them. Do that. Yeah, we need to remodel I think that's what Brother Muse said. There's people in Gordon Lake who have a gift at construction. They walked in the building and said, we need to fix that. And I think he said the next day or two, the guys were up there just on scaffolds fixing stuff. If you have a heart to do it, layperson, step out. Do it. I don't do it without the permission. But be willing to step out. Don't limit yourself to the little box that you think that your value is, because God has given you beyond what you can even imagine. Amen? What's that next slide, Tim? I think that's my last one. Vision, patience, and prayer. Have a vision. Exercise patience. Not every idea has to happen today. Not every idea is going to happen tomorrow. I think, Brother Sherman, you're seeing that in the district. Right? You became DS, and all these things had to happen. Not all of them happened immediately. It took some patience and still taking some patience, but it always takes prayer. What is exercise the patience? Those little 10-yard lines, man, that makes the game much longer. It'd be easy if I could just throw the ball into the end zone. We'd be out of there quick. It's not usually how it happens. 10 yards at a time. Set those goals. Allow the Lord to work. Thank you for allowing me to share. I pray that somehow it might be helpful for you. And may God bless your ministries. Amen.